Will be now read a second time. I call the member for Borkham Hills.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Mr Acting Speaker, hypocrisy, thy name is Labor. I cannot believe that after 16 years they can interrupt, and in fact it just highlights their ignorance on matters employment. There is not one person on the other side of the chamber, Mr Acting Speaker, who has ever created a job. So they have in fact forfeited the right to talk about unemployment. And before I go on to the stagflation that this country had to endure under Gough Whitlam, or the hyper levels of unemployment that this government had to endure under Paul Keating, let's talk about what the fundamental beliefs of the Australian Labor Party are. And that is, of course, when there is a problem with employment, let's fill the gap with the taxpayers' obligations to build the public sector. Now, that is a fundamental difference between that side of the House and this side of the House. We believe that government should get out of economic management. The government should facilitate strong levels of economic activity so the private sector can provide the jobs and wealth for the people of Australia. But I know we've got a great leader in the Labor Party named Kevin Rudd, a man soon to be returned to the Lodge so that we can beat him a second time, and his whole notion of employment growth is based around the need for the government to be the cornerstone. The government must be the cornerstone, Mr Rudd says. The government needs to manage an account. Now, some of you may have heard that rhetoric before. Some of you may have easily heard that rhetoric before about the government being the cornerstone of employment. That's called an organised economy. That's called a planned economy. That's called communism, socialism. That's the type of rhetoric that we got out of the Labor Party during the 1960s when we were fighting what was called planned economies. Mr Acting Speaker, the answer is not more government institutions. The answer is not more taxpayer money spent on the creation of public service jobs. The fact of the matter is, Mr Acting Speaker, this side of the House knows that we already have a Jobs Commissioner. His name's Barry O'Farrell, and his job is to create... Oh, they can laugh because they know that under their record, Australia reached its highest level of unemployed in the history of this nation. Not since the Great Depression did we see the figures under Paul Keating of 1 million people unemployed. And I know about it, Mr Acting Speaker, because unlike the other side that have always been able to draw a cheque from the union movement or the public service or politicians, I've actually worked in the private sector. And when we did have 1 million people unemployed, I was trying to get out of university and get a job. But it was difficult. It was difficult because Paul Keating created the recession we had to have. And even though Paul Keating's well and truly on the record with his own personal views of the leader of the opposition and the shadow leader of the opposition I see down here, Nathan, come back because I know you wouldn't believe in this rhetoric. We need to create an environment where the business community, when the market creates jobs. This is not something that the Jobs Commissioner can do because he will simply be another member of the public service. Mr Acting Speaker, for us to address things like...
Order, opposition benches.
So the Parliament can consider the importance of this particular bill. We need to go back into history, Mr Acting Speaker, and I think it's important that we start with a man named Edward Gough Whitlam, somebody who I know these people on the other side secretly admire. If you go into their offices and scratch beneath the service, you'll see pictures of Gough Whitlam there, highlighting the need for a change and highlighting the importance of the government taking a centre role in the economy. But Gough Whitlam has been remembered as the second most biggest failed Prime Minister in the country, second only, of course, to Julia Gillard. But Mr Acting Speaker, let's not forget that whenever this side of politics gets in charge of the levers of the economy, we have disaster. And nothing spelt disaster more than the stagflation that we saw under Gough Whitlam. Gough Whitlam would have been the type of leader who decided to create a Jobs Commissioner, because Gough Whitlam would have been the type of person that believed that the government was the only institution smart enough to employ people.
for Canterbury.
We need to move away from that 1970s rhetoric. We need to work away and
Member for
highlight the
Wollongong.
fact and remember the fact that the
Member for
socialists...
Toon, Gabby.
You leave her out of this, Mr. Rees. That the socialist dream is over. The socialist dream is well and truly over. And if you didn't need to reflect on, if you couldn't reflect on Gough Whitlam because, like me, you were too young to remember it, it's only another 20 years, like 15 years later, that we recall Paul Keating's inflation that we had to have. Paul Keating, like the leader of the opposition, his great friend, decided that he was going to control the levers of the government, and guess how he did it? Guess how he controlled the economy? Guess what lever he used to create jobs? Well, he called it monetary policy. But unfortunately for the people of Australia and the people of Western Sydney, his notion of monetary policy meant that he had to increase interest rates because it was all happening too fast and he couldn't control it. And if you can't control it, you've got to use the government to create it. And under Paul Keating's decision to use interest rates, we had not only people paying 17% for their home loans, we had 1 million people unemployed. Let's say it again, Mr. Acting Speaker, say that the people in this fair chamber know exactly what we're talking about. The last time Labor had its hands on the levers of this economy, we had 1 million people unemployed. Mr. Acting Speaker, at that time I was a university student growing up in Bankstown, and I can assure you, even though Bankstown was in the electorate of the then Prime Minister and the then Treasurer Paul Keating, we were poorly served by that particular local member who was too busy controlling the levers of the economy, making home ownership unaffordable, and of course the concept of a job unattainable. Can you believe the Labor Party would now stand up and with all the audacity and gusto try to lecture us on this side, the political party that created record growth, the political party that created record unemployment, the political party that gave us record lengths
Member for Wollongong.
the political party that gave us record lengths of low interest rates. They're going to dictate to us how to create a strong and economic environment. Well, as I said, Mr. Acting Speaker, hypocrisy, thine aim is Labor. Mr. Acting Speaker, it is quite clear to anybody who has studied the history of economics in this country that a healthy private sector means for a healthy economy. Only the private sector can create worthwhile jobs for individuals because it is driven by the need for profit. And those people on the other side who seem to think that profit is a dirty word only need to look at their superannuation statements to realise how important it is. That profit needs to be generated not by a false economy administered by the wannabe Premier and the shadow leader of the opposition, Mr. Rees. They need an economy that is going to be stimulated by confidence, by the lack of government interference, and of course an environment that creates the desire to spend and to save and of course to manufacture. Mr. Acting Speaker, really the Labor Party shouldn't have called this a Jobs Commissioner. They should have called it a review of the union movement, because any deception by the Labor Party on their desire that they desire to create jobs has been well and truly forfeited. Any belief by them that they genuinely believe, any claim by them that they genuinely believe that they want to create jobs can be easily put down by recalling their approach to the ACCC by the previous Labor Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. It was the ACCC that was created by former Prime Minister John Howard that created the most jobs in the construction industry, and I can recall that fact because at the time of his election I was working for the Civil Contractors Federation. The ACCC was part of the Liberal Party's plan to withdraw and to weed out union thuggery and corruption. That created confidence, Mr. Acting Speaker, and that's the type of lever that this government should be this opposition should be considering as introducing for the creation of jobs. We really need to spend more energy on reforming unions, Mr Acting Speaker, because it's quite clear from that side of the parliament that they want to change,
Order, opposition
change the
benches.
subject
Order.
to
The member for Auburn,
reconciliation every
the member
time
for
they
Shellharbour.
realise
The member
that
for
we're going
Auburn.
to weed out the unions. Mr Acting
Order,
Speaker,
order.
these inquiries need to be done by
The member's time has expired. The member for Wollongong and the member for Borkham Hills will resume their seats. The question